Hey guys, you found it. Welcome to the Fearless Pursuit of Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Richards. I'm a real estate investor and avid entrepreneur based out of Flagstaff, Arizona. My company is OPF and we flip, wholesale, and buy businesses. Listen in as I interview the nation's leading entrepreneurs and discuss the monumental battles of business and life. Hey guys, it's Brandon again, and I've got Paul here with me, based out of Arizona. He's the probate expert, so we're going to jump right in, and he's going to help us save some headache and some stress when dealing with your probate properties. So, Paul, appreciate you coming on today. Give us a little short synopsis of what you do, and we'll dive right in.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Brandon.
Mhm.
So I've been a lawyer since 1998, and around 2001, I got into probate and estate planning. And I'm not sure what prompted me to do that, but I find it really fascinating because it's intellectually challenging. Plus, dealing with the family dynamics and everything, I think is just really interesting. And so, I have that part of my personality where I like learning about relationships and how people interact and families and all of that. And I know this sounds cheesy, but I like helping people.
Yeah, no, that's great. And
All of your guests say that, I know, but
and I would imagine that in your world, not a single, I guess it wouldn't be a transaction. I think it's transaction because I'm in real estate, but a single case, what do you call them? Wouldn't be similar in real estate, but not a single one is ever the same. And so it's always a learning and problem solving little
oh,
situation there. Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and like I had a case. Well, shoot, I guess I can't get into the facts right now, but I get just weird cases all the time with
Mhm.
someone who committed suicide and trying to figure out okay, now what happens, or there's I have a case where there's one of the family members is suspected of killing one of the other family members. And I know that's pretty graphic.
Yeah.
I'm not not all my cases involve people killing each other, but but it gets challenging because then like Arizona has a slayer statute, for example, which a slayer statute, meaning
Mhm.
that if one person kills another person, then they can't inherit. But what if you can't prove it and there's merely suspicions and all of this stuff? So it gets kind of crazy, but yeah, it's really interesting. And what I really like doing is if I can help people prevent things, that's what I really like. Or if they're already in a mess, helping them through it in the simplest way possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in it being in real estate, I've dealt with quite a few probate situations or situations where it wasn't lined up properly. And so, and you mentioned you like preventing future problems. What kind of things can people start doing now in the estate planning side to make sure those rumors don't mess up things down the road?
Yeah. Well, so there's a whole bunch of different things, and it gets complicated.
Mhm.
I have a short little list
Yeah.
that I can go through. It's and I came up with the acronym TRUST, so TRUST.
Yep.
So one thing is to update beneficiary designations, meaning that I think a lot of people are confused that um, for example, it well, I don't know if you get a divorce, like or if you're in a divorce or you're separating from someone, does that automatically change things? No, it only does if the divorce decree is entered, but that's only for things that are governed by state law. Anything that's governed by federal law, uh, like an IRA or 401k
Mhm.
that's governed by ERISA, um, that that has to be you have to actually change the beneficiary. So just because you go through a divorce doesn't mean that that's automatically changed. So anyway, so there's dealing with
Right.
that. And then actually, I guess if I even back up, the main thing is knowing the difference between probate assets and non-probate assets, and people get tripped up on this all the time. So, um, what's a probate asset? That's something that's in your name alone when you pass away, meaning you have a checking account. There's no transfer on death, beneficiary. There's no, it's not jointly held or anything. It's
Mhm.
just your checking account. Okay, that's a probate asset. And meaning now, when you pass away, if it's under $100,000, that might your loved ones might be able to transfer that automatically, but if it could get tricky if you're in a second marriage and there's a surviving spouse and then some stepchildren or your natural children who are fighting over it, and so no one person can go to the bank and just accept it. So
Mhm.
um, anyway, so that's a probate asset, and then a non-probate asset is something like life insurance with a beneficiary, an IRA with a beneficiary, a home owned in joint tenancy. That's a non-probate asset. Um, and people get tripped up by this all the time because, like, I had a case recently where the family spent literally years fighting in court over a will, and was a will valid or not, and did the person in charge of the will, the personal representative, did that person breach his duty by not giving the people the things that were listed in the will? But the will said, this life insurance policy goes to this person. This IRA goes to this person. This jointly held bank account goes to this person. They were all non-probate assets.
Mhm.
There was one probate asset, but yeah, they just unfortunately they got confused about that and ended up spinning their wheels for a long time, thinking that things weren't done right.
Yeah.
And the person that did the will also obviously didn't know what he was doing, because he listed these things that are not governed by the will in the will. So anyway, so things get confusing pretty fast. So
Yeah.
it,
Huh. So
yeah,
basically, get your ducks lined up well before you even get sick or whatever the situation is. Start moving forward, because now I have a million questions, way more than I even had before, because I've never been on necessarily that side of it. Typically, when there's a probate issue in a contract that I've gotten, title and the sellers will sort that out on the back end, and I don't have anything to do with any of it. I just sit around, twiddle my thumbs, and wait for probate to get done.
right.
So I don't
Yeah,
have any
yeah.
idea what goes on, but I know it's a mess. So basically, what you're saying is get the will and the estate planning done well before it's needed.
Yeah, yeah. And don't try to do it on your own.
Yeah.
Just I'm not going to try to fix my Jeep on my own because I
Mhm.
wouldn't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Huh.
Um, it,
That.
it, 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 and then another thing. So there's the legal technical part. And you shouldn't assume that you know what to do just because you've watched a YouTube video, for example.
Mhm.
Okay. Go talk to an attorney and get it done right. So there's that part, the technical part. And then there's the other part. And I'm going to shock you with this.
Okay.
So I have noticed almost no relationship between whether a deceased person had estate planning documents and whether the family is going to fight over them. There's almost no relationship. Um, Here's what I mean by that. So, uh, it, it, let's say you have a will and everything's done right, but you give more to one child than to another child, or you give
Mhm.
everything to your second wife and nothing to your children, something like that. Okay, you have the documents in place, but if that hasn't been set up right and there's not an understanding and an explanation to everyone about why this is done, and an agreement among everyone that this makes sense, or they agree with you, or they're going to at least respect your wishes,
Mhm.
um, that's highly likely to blow up into an estate litigation. And
Really?
frankly, about 80% of what I do right now is estate litigation involving things like that, where people, yeah, they had a document, and how, whatever the document is, but they have something in place and they think, well, this is it. How dare you fight over it? Well, I have a situation right now. You'll appreciate this. There is a beneficiary deed on a house, and the lady signed it back in 2000. Well, I shouldn't give too much information. In Let's say around 2005. Okay, so this lady signed the deed around, or beneficiary deed, around 2005, and then never recorded it. Then around the time when she started to get dementia and was physically unable to get on a computer or in any way able to record the deed,
Mhm.
it got recorded. And we suspect it got recorded by the beneficiaries on that deed.
Yeah.
And so, yes, there's a writing, plain as day, all that kind of stuff. But we're sure going to fight over it because we don't think she had the intent to actually record the deed. We don't think she actually did it.
Mhm.
And so it does take more than just a piece of paper to make something go into place. There's, as lawyers, there's all kinds of things that we can fight over.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
point of all that, and I can go on for hours and hours, but the point of all that is, it's so important to have uh, communication and trust, and in the family, or like a foundation where the air's been cleared, people know what's going on, they're in agreement, and all of that stuff. And then if you all, then you have the documents on top of that. Now, uh, now it's much less likely that people are going to fight over things if they
Yeah.
understand.
Right.
Yeah, and I listen. I just talked to a client. Um, in that situation I was talking about the beneficiary deed, he told me just this morning that if his mom had told him that this is what she wanted, he would go along with it. He would stop fighting.
Right.
But he just suspects that there's something weird going on because the beneficiary deed was signed in, you know, again around 2005,
Yeah.
and it was never recorded until a time when she physically could not do it herself, and that raises the issue of whether she actually formed the intent and everything. And so yeah,
Right.
he feels like someone else is involved, doing things, and he feels cheated.
Yeah. Huh. So you were saying that there should be mutual agreements and discussions beforehand. I would assume that a verbal agreement is obviously not sufficient. Is that an additional document on top of the will and everything else?
Well, verbal listen, if there's a verbal agreement,
Mhm.
an actual verbal agreement, that is much that goes a long way towards preventing problems in the future. That goes a long way towards preventing them, and that's what's missing most of the time.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting. It's kind of a generational thing. Like I used to, uh, when I first started practicing, I was dealing with a lot of people who'd gone through the Second World War,
Mhm.
and that was kind of their age, and people who grew up in the 50s and 60s, or who lived in the 50s and 60s and had their kids back then, they had more of a mentality of keeping things private. Like
Mhm.
privacy uh, was really valued as a society.
Yeah.
And for example, like I mean, we're a very open society now. Uh, it's in the 60s, it was a taboo to get a divorce. So people would not get a divorce because they didn't want, other people spreading rumors about them, or,
Right.
or having a child out of wedlock or something like that. Like that, that's not that long ago. And
Yeah.
that was a
Right.
huge taboo. And so along that lines, the people back then would want to keep things a secret and not disclose who was getting what, or they were going to give a little bit more to one child and less to one child, or something like that. And the idea was, well, they'll figure it out when I'm gone. Well, that's a horrible idea.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So because you're putting the surviving people in a position of having to then sort it out themselves. And if they don't agree, and if they, if they don't understand, then the only option is frankly to go to court. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, and people nowadays, uh, I, I think people nowadays are even worse at communicating than the people 50, 60, 70 years ago. Honestly, I mean, I just, as a culture, as a society, I've seen it through my lifetime that uh, there's just, I, I don't know, how do I say it? I remember as a child when you would walk through the grocery store and talk to everyone.
Mhm.
And you never do that now. Like,
Mhm.
you'd get a weird look now.
Yeah. Right.
And I, I think families are kind of families are isolated more geographically now, and that causes its own problems. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I wasn't going anywhere with that. But I guess the point is that people still have a problem with communicating, but if you can overcome that and and uh, talk about why you're doing this or that,
Mhm.
um, with the whole family so that they understand, that's going to go a long way. And I would encourage people to, as much as you can, treat your children um, equally, or, and I hate the word equitable, but um, I I'm going to use it in this
Yeah. Yeah.
in this
It
context.
works here.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It works here.
So, meaning, like, if you have a child that maybe is completely irresponsible with money, you have one child that's responsible, one child that's not responsible.
Mhm.
Um, you can still give things equally to them, but maybe for the less responsible one, you figure out how to not give it to them right away, or have, give it in some tranches or something, so
Yeah.
that they have something left when they're retirement age.
Right.
And then be smart about how you set it up, so you don't have the responsible child be trustee over the irresponsible child's money.
Right.
That's never a good idea. Anyway, so it
Yeah.
it gets a little complicated.
Yeah. Wow. That's a lot to take in. Well, that, I mean, you made a good point there. I mean, and 50, 60, 70 years ago, a lot of families stayed near each other. The hometown was the hometown. And so
Right.
that made inter-family communications a little bit easier. And nowadays, like my family per se is, I grew up in Texas. Now I'm here in Arizona. My brother's in Utah. My brother was at one point um, in Idaho. My sister was at one point in California. So we just move around a lot more. And that
Yeah.
certainly makes those important, difficult conversations um, a less likely chance of that conversation happening.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. There's something to be said for Midwestern values. And
yeah.
in the Midwest, this kind of thing is, I, I, I don't have any statistics to show this, but
Mhm.
I think this kind of thing, meaning probate litigation, fights among family people after a loved one dies, I think that's less likely in the Midwest than it is here. Like, here in Arizona, it's typical for the parents to move here when they retire, and then the kids are still either they moved away for a job, or they're still back home in the other state or something like that. And so,
Yeah.
and then uh, it seems invariable that um, there's a child here locally that is more involved, and like helping the
Oh, yeah.
parents as they get older and all that kind of stuff. And then it's natural for that person to, to, well, I don't know. Uh, I see this where the child here locally tends to get the house, tends to get, a lion's share of things, and that causes a dispute right there. So I kind of go back to, um, as much as possible, uh, treat your kids equally if you can,
Mhm.
and and then talk to everyone about what things are. Don't rely on things being a surprise, and rely on your loved ones being able to sort things out after, or whatever, because that then causes an issue with the real estate, for example. I mean, where this all ties in, I've had situations where there's there's a closing scheduled for Friday.
Mhm.
I get the phone call, closings on Friday. Title company says we need a probate. What can you do? Well, uh,
Postpone 3 months. Yeah,
right, exactly,
yeah,
exactly. Do you know who the heirs are? No. So I had a
right.
situation recently where we had to discover who all the heirs were, and we paid $1,500, $1,500 to a heir search company to find, I don't know, like 12 or 15 heirs.
Mhm.
Um, but and then we went through the whole probate process, and then after that, I got a phone call from someone saying, "Oh, by the way, you missed the children." Like, all this company could find was like short tail relatives, nieces and nephews, and all of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, there were actually children that they
What?
never actually found.
What in the heck?
Yeah,
Really? That was
yeah,
strange.
I know.
So
So
a couple questions I thought of. So to your point where the sorry, lining it up, get everything lined up beforehand and having that difficult conversation. A lot of people are thinking, well, I'm setting up my will, I'm getting my estate planning done. And they think, okay, my children or heirs are good in the future, good to go because I did the proper documentations. But I've noticed, at least in my experience, if that stuff isn't communicated, then not only does it bring more stress and heartache, but now what you thought you were doing to save them financially and provide financial help on their passing has become a financial burden because now they got to go hire attorneys and private
right,
investigators, and so it turns into this fiasco. And I've seen these things last over a year, and I've seen them go as quick as a month. But I mean, it can be a nightmare. And so back to your point, I mean, communicating beforehand will certainly mitigate all of those even more stressful conversations upon the passing of whomever.
yeah, and I'm not making this up. This has actually been studied. Uh, the, so with very wealthy families that are dealing with tens or hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, uh, they focus on this area of building communication and trust within the family,
Mhm.
and they spend big money on it. Uh, I helped a local family not too long ago create a family code of honor and a family constitution, and create form a family council and um, a, a cousins council.
Oh,
Basically, so there's like the children and the parents got together and we're talking about, here's what we're going to do, and there was a family business involved, and here's what we're going to do with it, and we want to keep it in the family for the sake of our, eh, this family was incredible.
mhm,
They wanted to keep, their main thing was for the benefit of the employees. Like they loved their employees,
mhm.
and they saw it as like a joint mission for them to work together. And so as a lawyer, I kind of built things, some of the documents and everything, but that would have been pointless if they hadn't been the main ones in charge. So yeah, I
Right.
was able to help them through that process, and it was really cool. It was really
Yeah.
cool.
That sounds like some medieval stuff with all the
It's,
family crests and councils, and
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
yeah.
What my other thought was when you were speaking a second ago was, um, and forgive my ignorance here. So my assumption is just like real estate, that attorneys are licensed in their states and they can go get additional states.
Right.
So when you are probating an Arizona probate case
Yeah.
and there's family members outside of state and it or out, yeah, in other states,
Yeah. Yeah.
do their local laws come into your probate case, or is it all 100% Arizona case law that is referenced and legal in that particular case, and whatever Mississippi's rules are is
Yeah.
irrelevant?
So the Arizona law applies to an Arizona probate.
Mhm.
Uh, you would only deal with other laws if that was relevant, I guess. The way it might be relevant is like we have cases where maybe the family owns a farm in Nebraska,
Mhm.
and uh, so maybe the parents were residents here. They died here. There'd be Arizona probate, and that governs everything. We appoint a personal representative for the estate here in Arizona, and then that person can go to Nebraska, for example, and be appointed there to take care of the property in Nebraska. And if um, so in terms of who gets what is still governed by the Arizona law, but how that's carried out is going to be governed by Nebraska law.
Gotcha. So would it spice things up if lived here, passed here, but all the documentation, estate planning, and wills was originated and recorded in another state?
Yep, that spices things up for
Yeah.
sure.
That sounds like a giant headache. Uh, so you mentioned you've got two books. And I like the title, the one you mentioned beforehand, Probate Made Simple.
Yeah.
You, on that book, what's the summary behind that one?
Well, the summary, so I go through and I just kind of walk the reader through the probate process here in Arizona.
Mhm.
So that, that's basically what that's about. Like, that you figure out what's probate assets and what are non-probate assets. We talked about that. And then what kind of a probate, can you do it informally without a hearing, or do you have to go in front of a judge or a commissioner and have a hearing? And, there's different things. So it kind of goes through that.
Yeah.
And then the other book, I could step away. I
Go
see
for
it
it.
right
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, go for
Okay.
it.
Okay. I'm gonna fall off my little chair. Okay. Yeah. So the other book is Lasting Wealth, and
Yeah.
this is a uh, partly an autobiography, and partly uh, partly it's about how to do a family code of honor.
Mhm.
And so my own personal story, I'm a little embarrassed about it, but what the heck.
Yeah.
So just in a nutshell, what happened in around 2010, I inherited my father's $28 million estate, and half of that went to taxes, to pay estate taxes, and then the rest of it, there I was with 14 million in a TD Ameritrade account. Sure, I'm a probate lawyer and everything, but what was actually going on was uh, I had only met my father 6 weeks earlier. I'd never met, this is my biological father. I just met him 6 weeks before.
Mhm.
Then he died. Um, his identity had been kept a secret from me my whole life. And, and just, well, and the background that created that whole situation was that there was a whole bunch of secrecy and, oh, like overly controlling parenting, to
Mhm.
make sure that I didn't find out. And there's some alcohol abuse and in the family, and just a whole bunch of things. And then so everyone had died. All three of my parents had died at that point. There's no one to talk to or anything, or get any information from. And so I was just left to kind of deal with all this stuff. I kind of saw the money as a sick consolation prize, honestly, uh, because no one had communicated to me, or prepared me, or anything. Like, here's what it should, here's what we would like you to do with it.
Mhm.
Here's what it meant to us. Um, uh, where there was some meaning, and so it was just some money. And like, I I I think it's common for people to uh, look down on people who come into sudden money, like if they inherit it or win the lottery, or a sports star who gets a multi-million-dollar contract and then they're in bankruptcy 2 years later. It's common to think, well, they're just stupid because I would never do that. But psychologically, what's going on is someone who, let's talk about the lottery winner. So the lottery winner is just some numbers in a bank, and it doesn't have a meaning to it. Like, there's no personal connection to it.
Mhm. Right.
And um well, there's a couple of other things that have gone on, or that go on then. So um also money is kind of like a magnifying glass. Let me say that again. Money is kind of like a magnifying glass. So whatever flaws you have, if it's codependency and not knowing how to maintain boundaries, or addiction, or whatever it is, anger issues,
Mhm.
whatever the situation is, all you're doing is pouring gas on the fire then, with a whole bunch of money. So if like for me, I grew up in a codependent household, and so I didn't I had to learn later in life how to establish boundaries. So when I was just given a whole bunch of money, I just happened to be this guy. Yeah, I was smart. I was a lawyer and everything, with $14 million in my TD Ameritrade account, and I didn't know how to establish good, proper boundaries.
Mhm.
So not a good situation. So money
Right.
doesn't cure everything.
Right.
And so anyway, that's one of the things with it. And the premise to my book, Lasting Wealth, is you need to prepare the next generation, and you do that by telling them stories, telling them uh, so that they have an idea of where they came from. Who is grandma and grandpa? What did they stand for? What did they go through? What did mom and dad go through to
Mhm.
earn this money, and everything? Because I mean, otherwise it's just going to be when you die, it's going to be some money in a bank account, with no context, and they won't know that you got up every morning at 4 o'clock, and went to work early, and working 12 hours a day, and the times you had to borrow money for a carton of eggs or something, like,
Mhm.
they don't know all the struggles you went through. So
Yeah.
it so having stories helps. And oh, let's see what else.
Well, it puts meaning behind it, like you said, with like a lottery winner. There's no meaning behind it; it's just numbers and on the bank
Yeah,
account,
yeah,
and you kind of blow through it. Versus somebody that's worked hard for it, you feel the sting when you either lose it or spend too much. You're like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't have bought that truck, or whatever it is. Versus
right,
what you're saying is if you provide the backstory and the yeah, the story about how you came about that money, that provides meaning behind it, and then you're less likely to burn through it, and you still feel the emotional and the sting of um spending it, I guess.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we talked about a lot there, but
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah. So here, let me just, I guess, at least talk about the family code of honor. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
uh, it's the idea, and I know you mentioned that this sounds kind of medieval. Maybe it is. Uh, Now, what you're dealing with, or what you're competing against as a parent, is TikTok and YouTube, and
Mhm.
video games and all that kind of stuff. And all you have to share is like your story of how you worked. You busted your butt your whole life and
Mhm.
made some money. I mean, TikTok sounds more interesting than listening to that story. I've already heard that, Dad. I don't want to hear that. Whatever.
Yeah.
But um, if if you can, you have to step into a different role, and this is really interesting. And uh, I know I wrote the book, but I'm still kind of learning this myself. Like, uh, it- okay, there's the parenting role, where you make sure your kids are fed, don't die,
Mhm. Right.
and
Yeah.
they grow up to be adults. So good job there.
Mhm.
And that's more of a nurturing thing, and obviously some discipline involved and all that kind of stuff. But then if you happen to be financially successful, then the next step is to step into a slightly different role, more of a leader, because your 18-year-old or 25-year-old or 30-year-old doesn't want to be they don't want to be your kid anymore. Okay. um they're now a grown up,
Mhm.
but you can still be the leader, and it's a different mindset. And what you do is, and I'm so I have a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old, and so I'm getting into this role myself, and
Mhm.
I can feel it. um but the thing is, like, you just say, well, listen, we stick together as a family. Like, I don't know, you get a call at 3 in the morning because um your child has a flat tire or something like that. I raised that story because it happened to me.
Yeah.
Um, and why are they out at 3 o'clock in the morning? It's a whole different podcast, but something like that. And then, and then they say, well, thanks. And, I say, well, listen, I'm not going to bail you out of everything, but, we are family, blood is thicker than water. We're going to stick together. So,
Mhm.
hopefully they understand that's part of our core value as our family.
Yeah.
And then, and then the other, there's other things about, be honest with each other. And then, oh, I mean, we have certain core values within our own family, and then to tie it all together, one of your part of the code of honor has to be willing to call out the other person. Oh, okay, listen, we have this. One of our values is that we stick together.
Mhm.
And, I said I needed help the other day and you ignored me and you went out and played with your friends, like, or, went out with your friends and,
Mhm.
left me to figure it out on my own. What's up with that? And you, you stand in the heat. That's, be willing to stand in the heat, have that difficult communication, and, and that's just something that's really important, and that kind of ties back to the whole communication thing that we were talking about. That
Yeah.
if you start thinking about this and building that communication, um, that's going to go way. It's going to make everything go better, and it's going to make your children be more successful, your grandchildren be more successful, and
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah. And so that was the family code of honor. Is that because you mentioned in the past or past, 20 minutes ago,
yeah,
about the one wealthy family with a business and employees. It sounds like that is a written document that
yeah.
you and the family prepare. I'm assuming that takes a decent amount of time, but these are all things that um, they're not guidelines, but they're somewhat forced conversations done in a serious situation or serious, let's say,
Yeah.
because versus like having a dinner and just willy-nilly having a conversation about, oh, I'm getting up in there in age and this is my plan. That conversation works, but with developing the written code of honor, that really solidifies it versus just a passerby conversation at the dinner table at Thanksgiving or whatever.
Right. I think it becomes obvious to the people involved.
Mhm.
Like the family that I was dealing with, they knew that they needed help. There was bad communication with one of the one of the children,
Mhm.
and who was just estranged from the family, and and that really bothered the parents who,
Yeah.
because they wanted to have all of the children together. They wanted to be, to be able to celebrate holidays together as a unit without having the one refuse to come because there is bad blood among the siblings and all that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
and and that person really wanted to keep the business in the family, and so from that, from their standpoint, they needed, it was like an urgent thing. They needed to get something in place, and they knew that what they were doing was not working, and the years were going by, and they could see that it was going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, if for the typical person, you don't need to maybe have it be so serious. You don't need to have like a special trip dedicated to having family meetings. You don't need
Mhm.
to do it that way. You can do it more informally. And I'm doing it more informally. I don't have $100 million, business that I'm trying to pass down. Um, so, for me, I just have, I'm trying to just instill, like, this is our family's language. We have things that we say within the family, like
Yeah.
blood is thicker than water.
Mhm.
We stick together. And, what does that mean? Okay, well, there are some exceptions to that. Obviously, if there's physical or sexual abuse or whatever, the secrecy goes out the window. They all know that. So
Mhm.
anyway. So we do it in a healthy way. But yeah, that's a core value that has served my family for generations, and I want to pass it on. So
Yeah.
you can do that informally.
Yeah.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Yeah. Yeah. I think I guess my point was it makes the conversation feel more real, or not real, but, I don't know, like, more binding, I should say, if there's a third party helping navigate that particular situation.
That is a great point, and that's actually also been studied. Yes, there is something called a facilitator
Mhm.
that works with families on this kind of an issue. If you don't have the money for that, then you do it the best you can. But
Yeah.
we were getting well. I, I shouldn't disclose confidential information.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
I mean, facilitators get paid, pretty good money because
Mhm.
they're literally talking to all the members of the family and kind of,
Yeah.
getting involved and trying to bridge gaps and help
Right.
help schedule meetings and all this kind of stuff. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Paul, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Um, you mentioned your books are on Amazon,
yeah,
so we will point people that direction. But if people want to reach out to you directly, what's the best avenue for that?
you know, uh, easiest way, there's a couple of email addresses. You can put this in the notes if you want. One is Paul at suddenwealthprotectionlaw.com.
Yeah.
So sudden wealth because of my story, and I
Yeah. Yeah.
inherited money and I blew it, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's the story. And then there's Paul at Probate Made Simple. That's an
Okay.
easier one.
Okay. Awesome. No, I
So
appreciate it. Thank you so much.
thanks, Brandon. All right.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed today's content. I want to thank you all for listening in. And as the great Les Brown stated, if you are not pursuing your dreams, you are literally committing spiritual suicide. We'll catch you on the flip side.